and know that we're sending solidarity to him. But please welcome to the platform, Jeremy Corbin.
Thank you for standing up to the right to protest. The East End of London has seen that right to protest over centuries. People in the East End who stood up against the slave trade, people in the East End who stood up in support of the dockers, people in the East End who stood up for the Chartists, people in the East End who stood up with the suffragettes, and people in the East End that stood up against the fascists in 1936 in Cable Street. All of them stood for the right to protest in order to try and make change in society. If we give up and allow others to take away our right to protest, we've taken away our ability to make our voice heard to a wider public. That's why it's so essential to move the next way. It's also essential to stand by those that are under attack or being victimised. Many mosques this week have seen the most horrific attacks upon them. Many people, imams and others, who administer mosques have received the most horrific personal abuse being sent to them by the far right in our society. The far right are on the march. They're playing on the understandable concerns about poverty, exclusion, bad housing in our society, and lack of money being spent on health and education and all the things that matter. And they are blaming it all on immigrants, refugees, and boat people from Calais. It's a lie, it's nonsense. The problems created in health, education, and housing and everything else are created by the inequality in our society, the wealth of the few, at the expense of the many who are now living wherever they arise within our society. When the 1986 Public Order Act was passed through Parliament, Tony Benn, myself and a number of others opposed that at the time. We were told in terms by the then Labour leadership that we should be very careful of opposing this because the majority of the public wanted a control on protests and wanted to see people being quiet in the face of adversity. We didn't do that. We held a big demonstration in Hyde Park, and we had predicted then that this was the part of a slippery path, of a slippery slope to deny people the right to protest. And I pointed out then and point out now that every single person that has ever been elected to the British Parliament owes it to the Chartists, owes it to the Peterloo, owes it to so many others who laid down their lives in some cases for the right to vote, the right to be represented, and the right to be heard. That is how change was brought about in our society by protest and by popular demand. Last week we marched again, and we will be again and again, talking about Gaza and about Palestine. Every generation has a huge cause of its age, and I think the cause of the time is one of peace in the world. It's challenging the British government's position of spending more and more money on so-called defence, spending more and more money on armaments, investing in the arms industry to become a major exporter. Their problem is this, that at the International Court of Justice and at the International Criminal Court, their actions were found to be wrong. Their actions were found to be wrong because the Israeli government has been an agent of acts of a genocidal nature in Gaza. That means those that supply the weapons and which the acts of genocide are carried out are themselves liable to be culpable for it. And so we have to continue protesting and speaking out. 45,000 known deaths in Gaza. And as the rubble is slowly being uncovered, more and more bodies are being dragged out. I can only imagine what it's like to be dragging through the rubble of what was once your home, expecting to find the bodies of your loved ones underneath. And thousands more bodies are going to be uncovered as the weeks and months go ahead. This is a calculated act of bombardment. More bombs dropped on Gaza than were dropped in the whole of the Iraq War. More bombs dropped on Gaza than dropped on London and Hamburg together in the Second World War. This has been carpet bombing on a grand scale to destroy a civilian population and destroy the hopes of Palestinian people. We're here because we want peace in the world. We're here because we want the justice that accompanies a peace in the world. And we're here to demand rights for the Palestinian people to be able to live in peace and in justice in the land of their birth. And we will carry on meeting, we will carry on demonstrating, we'll carry on demanding, and we'll carry on demanding that the British government, the UK government, the British state stands up for what it should be standing up for, which is observance of peace and observance of international law, and not providing the necessary parts for the F-35 jets that are killing people, not being a conduit for delivery of bombs to Israel, and not being an agent in the genocidal acts that are taking place. This week, we're going to be commemorating many things. People will be, quite rightly, commemorating the Holocaust. Those that stood up against anti-Semitism in the 20s and 30s did so because they didn't want the Jewish people in Britain or Germany or anywhere else to be demonized and used as an excuse for the growth of fascism. We will stand with those people in that memory of those brave people that stood up in 1936 against fascists in Britain. We will stand up in exactly the same way against Islamophobia or any other form of racism. In order to divide our communities. Look at our audience today. Look at who we are. Look at our diversity. And look at the strength we get from our diversity. We'll be out there, meeting, marching and demonstrating as long as it takes to bring about that peace and that justice that the Palestinian people deserve. Thank you very much.